Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is JB Kalin. I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan, and I'd like to welcome you to our workshop series, and this is presented by Rakuten. It's my pleasure to introduce Momin Ghaffar, who's a data scientist with the San Antonio Spurs, who will be leading today's workshop titled Do-It-Yourself Shot Charts. So with that, I'd like to welcome Momin.
Thanks. Thank you, that was really nice. So, it's the end of the conference. I know everyone wants to get out of here as soon as possible, so we'll try to stay on a schedule. For those of you who don't know me, howdy, my name is Momin. I worked at the San Antonio Spurs. I've spent a lot of time dabbling in football analytics, basketball analytics, and sports data is my passion. Really quickly, there are 3 goals for today's session. 1, to get everyone out of here as soon as possible. 2, to make everyone here feel empowered to own a data pipelining and data visualization process so that you can create your very own shot charts. And then 3, for everyone to have fun. This is supposed to be for you guys, and I know there's a lot of theoretical stuff out there, and you guys have sat through a bunch of different things. We want to get here and get you guys in a situation where everything is easy to do and you can recreate this at home. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and start off by acknowledging some very important people in our space. Kirk Goldsberry, I think he may be wandering around the rooms in this conference still, really pioneered a lot of the visuospatial research in our basketball analytics community. A lot of the shot charts and a lot of the shot charts theory is really, born out of his work. And so, for us in this particular niche, we owe a lot of credit to him. Secondly, all of the basketball data providers out there. The NBA obviously does a really good job, but there are also numerous third-party providers, Second Spectrum, SportView, and really they've been pouring kerosene on the fire. The proliferation of the data in the space is really due to them in some part. And finally, all of the open source basketball analytics champions. Really, it's the nerds in mom's basement that have made a lot of this contemporary research see the light of day and be a focal point in some of these conversations here at Sloan. So I'm going to go ahead and really quickly at a high level explain what this workshop's going to cover. Because it's a data pipelining and data visualization workshop, there's going to be a bifurcation of what kind of tools we're going to use. So on the back end, we're going to have R, and we're going to scrape data, we're going to prep data, and we're going to have it all prepped and ready to go so that we can drop it into Tableau. And for those of you who aren't super familiar with Tableau, hopefully by now you've attended some of those workshops earlier in the day, and you know that it's a business intelligence tool, a data visualization software that really brings insights come to life, right? And so please, if you haven't already, go ahead and download all of the materials. There's that tiny URL at the very beginning. And if not, work with your partner, your neighbor here, and try to keep up. This is a jam-packed session. Oh yeah. It's https://tinyurl.com/DIY shots SSAC. Right on. So go ahead and we're going to do this in order. Go ahead and open up that R script. I'm going to spend a little bit of time working through it on my end. And there are also, tidbits littered throughout that PowerPoint as well so that you can reference it. And then I'm going to switch back and forth between the PowerPoint and the R script, and then I'm going to switch from the R script to the Tableau interface as well. So who all has worked with R before? That makes my heart very happy. Very good. And so You've seen a lot of really good stuff in these workshops today, and for those of you who've been here all day, the super duper troopers, you will probably understand where I'm going with this. The important part here is not for me to spend every single second of this presentation explaining what exactly each of these little commands means. Hopefully there's going to be opportunity for you guys to go home and research some of these commands as well. Right off the bat, the basis for a lot of the data here is JSON format. And so what we want to do here is pipe in JSON data that the NBA has put up and scrape that data down. And so through a process of ingesting that JSON data using the R package, RJSON, we can get neat table-like data in these data frames and drop them into CSV files and drop them into Excel workbooks that we can then visualize it in Tableau. Really quickly, I know Matt did a great job in the last session explaining the different data types. For those of you who may be attending your first workshop today, I'm going to go ahead and highlight and copy and paste that very first URL that you see in that R script. And that looks ugly, right? But there's some sort of rhyme and reason behind why the data has been configured that way. And so what we're going to do here is wrangle all of that data and basically extract things according to this formatting and neatly place it in our typical way of looking at Excel documents or data frames, right? Columns and then data. So I'm going to breeze through this R script because we definitely want to make sure that we have enough time to come up with some cool-looking shot charts. Very quickly, what we're doing here in this first section is literally ingesting that data from the stats NBA or NBA stats page, and that URL is the one that I just showed you. Now, a best practice in a lot of programming and writing code is to keep things in modular chunks. And so the output here is a Excel file, right? And what I'm going to do here is read in that same CSV just so that I have a basis for taking the players that I want to loop through. So I want a specific cache of shot coordinates for each player that's played in the NBA this season, or to be more proper, has showed up in the box score this season. In this modular chunk, what we have here is the function. It looks a little intimidating, but what we're doing here is prepping this function so that we run it through this loop. And what this loop is doing is generating multiple data frames that are compiled such that we have a basis by which we can just drop all that in a CSV file. Now, I want to address a couple things. What you're doing is accessing some fairly rich data. And if every single person in this room hit it at the same exact time, I'm very confident that there's going to be some throttling. And so I've taken the liberty of compiling and packaging some of those data sets. And what you have in those Excel files is that box score data and the player shots data. And we're going to go ahead and use that so everyone's working with the same vernacular, the same data as well. And so I encourage all of you to go home after this and run this. It typically takes me like an hour to run this thing through. I could be doing something wrong, but it's fairly dense data as well. So keep that in mind. And so I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint because I do want to explain at a high level, thematic elements of what I just described. So data scraping and data pipelining is part of an ETL process. And so for those of you who are trying to break into analytics or an organization that focuses on ingesting vast amounts of rich data, you're going to be doing stuff with ETLs. And a lot of you will probably find yourselves in a data engineering type of role where that is sort of the bread and butter of an organization's data infrastructure, right? And so you want to be able to do these ETLs. And the ETL literally does what we just described, right? Extracts the data, transforms the data, and loads it into some sort of format. Now, very quickly, I want to address, and I want to make this a little bit clearer, the fact that, things make our lives easier. And so a task scheduler is one of those tools at our disposal to have these things running in the background whenever maybe we're watching TV or late at night. We want all of the most recent data to be ingested into a SQL database that we may have spun up, or a folder on a shared drive somewhere if you're part of a sports organization. And task schedulers are really helpful tools in that regard. And so you can do stuff with other providers, and there's an entire cottage industry around scheduling these types of tasks and having particular triggers when there's data incompletion or things of that nature. But I wanted to take a second to address that. The other thing, I very briefly just now alluded to having SQL databases. And here to the left, actually, that ugly script right there is me literally taking some of this data, creating a brand new table in a SQL schema, and populating that with all this data. And so I do this for my own side projects and whatnot. And so I wanted to encourage you guys to look up that documentation. Unfortunately, we're not going to have the time to spin up a brand new SQL database, but I would highly recommend going with something like Postgres. It's very easy, and there's a lot of great documentation online. And then the last thing, Google Sheets. Tableau has a built-in native interface with Google Sheets. So if SQL databases really aren't your thing and kind of intimidates you, know that you can leverage free tools out there like Google Sheets. I will say that the Google Sheets API can be a little finicky, and sometimes you may run into some problems, but it's definitely a phenomenal resource for those of you who aren't really familiar with the SQL or anything like that. So we're going to go ahead and pivot now and talk about what it is that we really wanted to do today, right? The shot charts, the really cool ones. So hopefully by now everyone's been able to download everything, and the Wi-Fi hasn't been strained too hard, but I'm going to go ahead and move to Tableau now. So, and this is the part where it gets super interactive, right? If you didn't have R installed, that's totally fine. You're caught up now. Go ahead and bookmark those Excel files that you had, and know that we're about to do some really cool stuff with them. So box score shot data and player shot data is what you should have. So if you're in Tableau, you're going to read in your data. The very first step is to identify which data source you're going to be dealing with. I know we're going to use Excel, but I wanted to show very briefly what it would look like if we did something with Google Sheets. So I'd have to log into my Google account, and everyone here would have to have a Google account. I'd have to greenlight Tableau, and then voila, right? A couple of those data sources pop up here, and I could click on them, and I would have Google providing that back-end data source, refreshing on a cadence that I specify. But today we're going to go a little old school, and we're going to use Excel, and that's totally fine. So the first thing I'm going to ask you guys to read in is the player shots data. Should look something like this. Go ahead and click into the sheet 1. And now Tableau knows that there is a data source called NBA player shots. And because I want you guys to have all the data here prepped and ready to go, let's go ahead and click on data here, add a brand new data source, Oh, whoops, new data source. And then go ahead and read in your box score data. All right, now we're ready to get going. So go ahead and click on sheet 1. And I wanted to explain something about Tableau. Tableau is a powerful aggregator of data. The data that we've read in, the specific player shot data, is coordinate level, right? So each shot that was taken by a player this year has its own XY coordinates for each game, right? And so what we're about to do is really look at that data and also provide a background for all that data. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you guys to do one quick thing. Identify this background images area in Tableau. Click on NBA player shots. And go ahead and add that basketball court image. Now, you want the X field to correspond with an X location, and the Y field to correspond with a Y coordinate location. And before you click OK, know that we're about to tweak the parameters here for a second. I want you to put, for the X-axis at least, left starting at -250, going to 250 on the right. And then we're going to do something different for Y. We're going to do -52 to 418 for Y. And then click OK. And then click OK once more. Yeah.
Is that just the quirk of the NBA data, essentially?
Yeah. Yep.
I can explain it. It's tenths of feet are the units, and the chord is 50 feet wide. It's -25 to +25, and the origin is at the center of the basket.
Correct. Yeah. Perfect. So I alluded to the fact that we had this coordinate level detail, and what we're going to want to do is add some additional measures. That data set that you had didn't have aggregated measures like field goal percentages. It wouldn't make sense to have a field goal percentage for every single row of data. What we want to do is later on in this conversation be able to visualize different field goal percentages or different effective field goal percentages or true shooting percentages. So to that end, I'm going to go ahead and ask you guys to start adding in calculated fields. And go ahead and use this as a little cheat. Copy and paste these specific measures. And I'm going to explain this player name attribute one in a second. It's a hack. And so we're going to get around some quirkiness of the data that we're dealing with and a quirk that Tableau has in its software. So I'm gonna do this with you guys. I'm gonna copy and paste these different measures. All right, so we had field goal percentage and player name, a modified version of it for the NBA player shots. And now I'm going to go to sheet number 2 and just go ahead and click on that box score data here. And just know that we're going to do stuff with the box score as well. So the box score data has a few more measures that we're going to want to deal with. So let's go ahead and copy and paste and bring these guys in as well. So once more, we're doing field goal percentage. We're going to do 3-point field goal percentage this time. We're going to bring in free throw percentage. And I alluded to this earlier. In the basketball analytics community, we want to look at something that, fairly factors in the fact that 3-point field goals are worth more and that free throw shooting is a skill that's part of shooting in its totality, right? And so this true shooting percentage is something that folks like to look at as something that adds to just field goal percentage. So we're going to go ahead and include that as well. And then finally, points per game. And just for completeness, let's go ahead and get minutes per game as well. All right, so now we're really ready to take off. So by now we've got all of our data prepped. Now's the time to do some really cool stuff with it. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and click into sheet number 1. Right-click it and duplicate it, and I promise I'll explain why we're doing this in a second. All right, let's call sheet 1 player shots. And let's call this duplicated sheet 1 zone summary. So I'm going to click into player shots. And in this top left corner, make sure that you've clicked into player shots as well. Otherwise, you're not going to see the appropriate dimensions and measures. So go ahead and drag location X into columns here and location Y into rows. And I alluded to this earlier. Tableau is a powerful aggregator of data. You have to explicitly state when you don't want it to be aggregated. So let's go ahead and instead of call it a sum, let's make it a dimension. And now we have a very nascent phase shot chart. I promise we're going to do more to it in a second. Before we do too much with the player shots, we're going to repeat the process for the zone summary. And let's go ahead and drag location X and location Y. And we're going to go ahead and make these averages. And I promise I'll explain why we're doing that in a second. It's not going to look cool like the other one, but we'll get to that in a second. So here for this player shots visual, what we want to do is make this prettier, right? Right now you have no context, no idea who shot what and whether or not it was a made or miss. So what we want to do is bring in some cool data here. The shot made flag is on a 0-1 domain of possible values. And we're going to go ahead and drop it onto color here. And once again, right, Tableau is a powerful aggregator of data. You have to explicitly state when you don't want it to be aggregating data. So let's go ahead and make it discrete. And let's go ahead and make it a dimension, right? And so now we've got the 0-1 shot made flag. And yeah, let's go ahead and make it discrete. Perfect. And then I like to do things on a red-green gradient. So the zeros are going to be missed shots. So red, no good. And the ones are makes. So let's go ahead and tweak that real quick. And we'll clean this up in a second. So let's go ahead and bring in the event dimension and drop it into the tooltip. Let's go ahead and bring in the player name and drop it into the tooltip. Let's go ahead and bring in the team name and drop it in the tooltip. Let's go ahead and bring in something called basket type and drop it in the tooltip. Let's go ahead and bring in action type and drop it in the tooltip. All right. So now when I hover over any of these particular shots, you're going to get a litany of data. And we're going to go ahead and clean this up in a second. But let's switch over to zone summaries real quick. And let's repeat the process, but we're going to do something a little differently this time. The data was row level, right? And so if we were to say that we wanted to look at a player's zone summary statistics aggregated, what we would need to do is provide a level of detail. And that detail is going to come from something called shot zone basic. And we're going to go ahead and drop it onto that detail mark. And now we get to do some cool stuff with those measures that we created on the back end here. We're going to drop that onto the color mark here, and let's go ahead and edit this color real quick. I'm a big fan of the red-green diverging. For folks that are red-green colorblind, you can always go ahead and do orange to blue. Let's go ahead and say if you're shooting around 25% anywhere, that's pretty poor shooting. And if you're shooting around 65% somewhere, that's pretty strong. Let's go ahead and apply. Click OK. And let's go ahead and change this actual mark as well. So let's go ahead and fill it out a little bit. And let's go ahead and make the size a little bit larger. And you want to provide additional context to this, right? Everything looks uniform here. We know that certain regions of the court are where players attempt more shots and where they make more shots. So let's go ahead and provide a little bit of context there. So let's take that shot made flag, and now we're going to let Tableau do its thing. We're going to let it be a powerful aggregator of data. And let's go ahead and drop it onto the size mark here. And now it's done something pretty cool, right? Intuitively, this makes a lot of sense to me, and I'm going to explain why, right? Like most shots are going to be closer to the rim, and then you're going to see, right, the further away you get, that there are fewer shots. But with the modern NBA being what it is, you're going to see a lot of above the break threes, and years and years ago, this probably wouldn't have been a thing. But keep in mind that the data that we're dealing with is this year's data up until the All-Star break. It'll be incredibly interesting to see, a year-over-year snapshot. And so I'm going to empower you guys to do that on your own. So now we have two very basic shot charts. And the tooltips look really ugly, but we'll go ahead and clean that in a second. Let's go ahead and focus on box score data, though. And what we want to do is bring in all of that rich data. And so it's going to start first with that player name data. Or we're going to go ahead and drop in player names so that we have a basis to scrutinize these data. And there's a little shortcut here. Go ahead and bring in measure names and drop it into the columns region. And then let's go ahead and bring in measure values and drop it onto text. And now you're going to see a whole lot of data. And whoops, I messed up, guys. I'm going to wipe out this sheet. I needed to be on box score data. So box score data, we're going to catch up real quick. Bring in player name, bring in measure names, and drop measure values onto text. And now we have a whole smorgasbord of really cool statistics. Let's go ahead and pare some of this down. So plus minus, that's pretty cool. 3 points attempted, that's pretty cool. 3-point field goal percentage, yeah, I dig it. Assist, blocks, defensive rebounds, these are all important statistics, don't get me wrong, but not really something that we're going to bring to life here in our shot charts. So field goals, free throw attempts, those are good. Minutes, let's go ahead and grab minutes and minutes per game and number of records and just trash them. Offensive rebound, personal fouls. Let's go ahead and dispense of them as well. And now it looks kind of awkwardly formatted, so I'm going to go ahead and bring some of this over. Points per game, field goals attempted, field goals made. I think I kicked away that true shooting percentage. I like true shooting percentage a lot. Let's go ahead and bring it in. We're going to bring plus minus at the very end here. Threes attempted, threes made. Oh, awkward order. And let's go ahead and make sure that field goal percentage is right next to field goals made and field goals attempted. Let's go ahead and make sure that it goes free throws made, free throws attempted, free throw percentage, and then a plus minus. And if you're looking right now and you're thinking, why are true shooting percentage and field goal percentage and free throw percentages on a 0-1? Tableau doesn't know any better, so go ahead and right-click on 3 field goal percentage here in your measures. And let's go ahead and formally tell it that its default property should be percentage. All right, so that changed one of them. I'm going to go down this list here. All right, free throw percentage, that's another guy we got to deal with. So free throw percentage taken care of. And finally, my favorite here, true shooting percentage. All right, now we're ready to roll. Oh, thank you, good catch. All right, now I think we're really ready to go. Okay, so let's go ahead and call this expanded. It's an expanded box score. I'm going to ask you guys to right-click it and duplicate it. And we're going to further pare it down, and I'm going to explain why in a second. Let's call this offensive metrics. And let's get rid of everything except for points per game, true shooting percentage, field goal percentage, and 3 field goal percentage. We'll keep free throw percentage as well. All right, so now we have some really cool offensive metrics. All right, so we have 4 specific tabs that we're going to play with in a second, and we're going to compile all of this together. I know if you guys are following along, in PowerPoint, we're going to do all of our final tooltip prep and polish at the very end. So let's go ahead and compile everything and make it look really, really cool. So I clicked on dashboard. It's the second little option here. You've got a brand new worksheet that you could be creating. Let's go ahead and create a brand new dashboard. And let's go ahead and give ourselves some real estate to play with. Fixed size, and let's go ahead and work with the generic desktop here. All right, so now we have a dashboard. And a good dashboard always needs a title. So I dragged that text object and placed it right here in the middle. And I'm going to call it shot charts. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And wow, that's a really big title. All right, we're going to add stuff to it in a second. So let's go ahead and drag in zone summary. And if you're in Tableau, you're gonna realize that this quirk is a little annoying sometimes. But go ahead and bring that sheet underneath the title here, and it's going to take up a lot of space. But don't worry. Let's go ahead and punt on these legends for now. Remove them from the dashboard, and let's go ahead and shrink this title. It doesn't need to be that big and loud. And let's go ahead and stick a pin here so that it's not resizing awkwardly. And let's get rid of these axes. It doesn't really make sense to have them, and it looks ugly. All right, so now we have a zone summary of a bunch of players with no context. Let's add some context. So see what I'm doing? I don't want it underneath the zone summary. I want it to be right next to zone summary. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the legend for a second. I'll remove these headers. And now I have player shots that's accompanying the zone summary. Give me one more second, and I promise we'll explain how to make this more dynamic. I'm going to go ahead and bring in offensive metrics to complete the trio here. And let's go ahead and right up here, click on Fit With. It's going to look really ugly, but it'll be okay. Okay. So what I'm doing here is creating essentially the panels of this shot chart. And I'm not saying it has to be like this, but this is a flavor of what you can do with all this cool data. And we're going to make this a lot better right now. So what we want to do is go make sure you're clicked onto this offensive metrics sheet here. And let's go ahead and click on more options. And we're going to bring in some filters. Before we do that, we have to specify which filters we want. So let's go ahead and bring in event, drop it into here, and make sure that all possible events are filterable. And do the same for player name and team name. Make sure we're selecting all of them. And now let's go back to the dashboard. Okay, so now let's go ahead and drag in those different filters. I'm going to go ahead and start off with the team name. And that's gross. Let's go ahead and make it a multiple values filter with the drop-down functionality. And place it right on top of our little visualizations here. And let's go ahead and add another filter. Player name this time. Multiple values drop down, yet again. And let's go ahead and place it right next to team name. Let's give it some more real estate. And then finally, one more time, let's go ahead and bring in event as a filter. There are a lot of events. So multiple values drop down and bring this guy here. And let's go ahead and make these spaced out more appropriately. Okay, so really good best practice for Tableau. If you start clicking on this, it's going to immediately start moving the visualizations around. What you want to do is make sure that anytime you're not sure, anytime that you create a filter, you want to provide an apply button so that it doesn't do things without your permission, right? I now need to say apply for it to work. So let's do this for player name as well. Go to customize, show apply button. And then let's do the same for event. Customize and show apply button. Okay, so now I am confident that if I filter any of this, it's going to filter this sheet. But we want it to interact with the other ones, so what are we going to do? What we want to do is apply these filters across the dashboard here. So we're going to go ahead and right-click on event, and we're going to go to apply to worksheets here, and where it says selected worksheets, click on that, and have it work for all of the worksheets on this dashboard. All right, wow, something happened, right? Let's go ahead and do the same for player name. Apply to worksheets, all on dashboard. Okay, and then one more time for team name as well. Okay. The last thing I'm going to ask you guys to do is go ahead and click Use as Filter. And so if I were to click on Dennis Schroeder, it's going to affect these visualizations. So I'm going to go ahead and keep all these events, and I'm going to go ahead and select a team near and dear. And go ahead and move these things around a little bit, give them more room. I unpinned it actually, so it could resize effectively. So these tooltips could be prettied up a little bit, and the shot charts could use a little more TLC. So let's go ahead and jump into player shots real quick and change the shapes real quick. So for the shot made flag, let's go ahead and drop it on a shape. And one more time, let's go ahead and make it a dimension here, zeros and ones, right? Makes and misses. And where it's a 0, let's go ahead and just give it a big, ugly X. And then where it's a make, let's give it a filled in circle. All right, so now it kind of reads more intuitively. Okay, and for the zone summary, what I want to do is bring in player name attribute. All right. And then what I also want to do is go ahead and prep some of these fields. So field goal percentage, let's go ahead and make it a percentage. And let's go into the tooltip now. So what I want to do is just make this tooltip easier to read, right? A player from a particular region of the court shoots a particular percentage. And we can also provide how many were made and how many were attempted by bringing in the shot made flag, or sorry, a shot attempted flag into the tooltip as well. Right, so we're going to go ahead and insert the shot attempted flag. All right, so now when I hover over any of these particular regions, we get more detail. And for those of you who are really curious about what that hack was, Tableau would have normally placed an asterisk for the player name here, but we went ahead and created something so that when we're at the team name level of detail or greater, we're going to have that just be a blank. But when we go ahead and click on an individual player, let's go with Rudy Gay, my man. His name's going to show up now in that zone summary. So it's a matter of aesthetic preference here. And I'm going to go ahead and also order this offensive metrics sheet by points per game. Let's go to Mar. And let's go ahead and do something with this player shots because it's not looking pretty. So similar concept, right? We're going to go ahead and drag player name. Center it. Let's go ahead and leverage basket type and action type. Center it. Give it a little color. Let's go ahead and explain what game or event this is occurring for. And we probably don't need team name. We know. All right. So now it's telling us what happened for what player. And we can get really fancy. We can go ahead and include the period, minutes remaining. You can also include the seconds remaining, the shot clock, or sorry, seconds remaining at a particular, basically you can get the time the shot was attempted at. If you really wanted to do some really cool stuff, you could look at when in the shot clock the shot was attempted, but you'd have to go in the back end and really do some cool stuff in R to get to that data. But let's go back to our dashboard here. And to complete this, we had an expanded list of box score metrics, right? So what we want to do now, let's go ahead and jump into the offensive metrics sheet. And let's go ahead and in the tooltip, let's get rid of all this. We're going to use a relatively new Tableau feature. And we're going to go ahead and include that expanded sheet into the tooltip of this offensive metrics sheet. All right, and let's go ahead, give it some room to breathe. I moved it from 300 to 1,000. It's really up to you. And now when I hover over any of these guys, I have those offensive metrics, but we also have more context, right? Points per game. We know how many points in total, right? We know when we're looking at field goal percentage, how many field goals were attempted and free throws. We know like when Lonnie's shooting 100%, right? It's only been for 4 free throws, right? And so I would encourage you guys to also go into the expanded sheet and make sure that we're explicitly telling Tableau that some of these are not decimals, they're integer values, just so that looks prettier. But I want to make sure that I leave some time for questions and I pretty this up just so that it's got a little more color to it. So I'm clicking upper left-hand corner of this entire dashboard. I'm going to go ahead and give it a background that I think is a bit prettier, gray. And I'm going to go ahead and jump into these sheets and make sure that it's the same color background, format, shading, worksheet, gray. I'm going to do the same for player shots. Worksheet, gray. And now we've got some uniformity, right? Let's go ahead and click on Zone Summary. In the Layout section, let's go ahead and give it a border, decent size one. Let's go ahead and make this orange. Let's go ahead and make this blue. And then finally, let's go ahead. Oh, that's not the same size. All right, let's make that one blue, and then let's make offensive metrics green. And we probably want to center these. And let's give the entire dashboard a background as well, or sorry, a border. And really, that was kind of the meat of what I wanted to share with you guys. This can be tailored differently. I'm going to go ahead and show off what I had done slightly different. If somebody wanted, some sort of help navigating this overview, you might want to provide a couple use cases. I would go ahead and create something like an info sheet and go ahead and drop that in and find an image online of a question mark and explain, you could specifically look at one team and then see how the percentages change. You could click on a couple of your favorite players and click through them and see if their shot signatures are a little different. You could also look at a particular event, that triple overtime game, what was it, yesterday or a couple days ago, see what happened, right? And so this hopefully was a primer on how to visualize some of this and make all of that sports data that we know kind of exists more accessible. And so, yikes, didn't want to show you guys that. That's really all I had, guys. That was it. I'm happy to take questions now. Sir?
Hi. Can you take that final product and make it available outside of Tableau? Or is the interactive part only available inside Tableau?
So the short answer is yes. And the long answer is you can make it available outside of Tableau in a bunch of different ways. You can embed Tableau into like a web page.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at.
And
okay.
Some folks have done really cool things with certain companies have taken Tableau and embedded it into their software. And I'm not exactly sure how it's done, but it's definitely possible. And there's documentation on it provided via Tableau.
Thank you.
Sure. Sir?
Have you seen a way to edit two different sets of info on the same color so that you could give 3 pointers, red and green, differently from 2 pointers, red and green?
That's really cool.
2 sets of filters. Do you have Tableau to do that?
Yeah, it definitely can. I didn't think to do that.
I'll YouTube it.
Right on. Sir in the back.
So when you created the true shooting percentage calculated field, what syntax is used? Is it like a SQL-based language, or is it Tableau's like own proprietary language?
It's Tableau's own proprietary language, but they definitely borrow heavily from Excel and SQL.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Sir in the back.
Do you use anything other than Tableau within the sports? Like, do you have like something that you built in-house, or any other software or something that you use to visualize different sets of data that you use on a day-to-day?
Yeah, and I'm not speaking for any particular team, but generally speaking, folks use R. You can do really cool things with ggplot. It's really a matter of preference. Yep.
Just out of curiosity, I appreciate the presentation. It was really
Thank
good. Do the Spurs use Tableau?
I'm not at liberty to answer that.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. Can
Yeah,
you
of
talk a
course.
little bit about the process of looping through teams and players and, you know, going to the NBA website and maybe getting blocked? Or like how you generated that file?
Yeah, I mean, is the question about like throttling and how to get around that? Yeah, I mean, there's like an elegant way to do this, and it's basically looping this over and over again, right? Until you stop meeting resistance. For the sake of like, you know, keeping things as simple as possible, I would say you're basically providing another shot output loop here, right? And so what you want to do is create like maybe shot output 1, shot output 2, and then finally you're going to have everything provided. So like it would be like super advanced R, right? But like for all players that already exist in one of the shot output files, you would ignore that player from a subsequent loop, right? But I didn't want to provide it here because, listen, like throttling's done on purpose, right? If things are being hammered, then all of us can't, you know, access data, and so I'm keeping it pretty trim here. Anything else, sir?
Is there a reason you generated your own advanced stats? Because can't you get some of that through MBA stats as well? Don't they have like TS now?
Yeah, I mean, so they've had various, I guess, iterations of data publicly available, right? I think a few years back there was a really cool API. You could see things like closest defender. So I think you're going to see, you know, ebbs and flows with what data is publicly available. But for me, you know, as an enthusiast, I'm always going to want stuff, and I'm always going to want to put in my own SQL database and have it grow and grow and grow, and then think about different types of problems. Yeah, sir in the red.
How did you come up with the dimensions for the basketball court? Was that just trial and error, or I'm trying to figure out how you calculated those numbers, because will we all have access to that basketball court that you had the picture of?
I'm going to answer in reverse order. Yes, you do have access to that basketball court. It's part of that Google Drive, and the gentleman up here at the front, I think, explained it eloquently. It's based on the dimension, like the centering of the hoop, right, and then the feet from, you know, different landmarks on the court, and so it's taking that and basically providing a structure for the shots. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, just curious, how far back does the XY coordinate data go back to in terms of location data?
The last I looked, I don't want to answer that. I don't know. I think I know for a fact that it goes back to 2016, 2017, but it could go back even further than that. All right, I think we're about there on time. So thank you all. Really appreciate it. Hope you learned something.